Hi, this is Doug Stannard with FearlessPresentations.com. In earlier sessions, we've kind of talked about how you really want to avoid writing out your presentations word for word and trying to memorize entire presentations. It's a whole lot better to design the presentations just a little bit differently, and when you do, it'll help you reduce your nervousness and also make it much more interesting for the audience to kind of hear as well. Well, the technique that we teach in the Fearless Presentations class, the 2-day Fearless Presentations class, is a technique that we call the 3-point talk, but in reality it's a 3-point talk, a 4-point talk, a 5-point talk. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the technique to kind of teach you how to do the technique, right? So there's going to be a 3-point talk on how to do a 3-point talk anyway. So basically my topic is how to write or design a presentation in about 15 minutes or less. And there's basically 3 things you want to keep in mind when you're designing your presentation. First thing you want to do is you want to realize that you want to narrow down your key points to just about 3, 4, 5 key points. If you do that, it's going to make you a whole lot more concise. Second thing you want to do is you want to give compelling evidence for each one of those bullet points. You want to prove that those bullet points are true. And then finally, at the end, you want to really summarize your presentation so that the people in the audience know exactly what you want them to remember, right? So let's kind of start with point number 1. You want to narrow down your key points to basically 3, 4, 5 key concepts when you deliver your presentation. Now, if you think about it, what most people do when they design their presentations is they sit down and they've got their PowerPoint in front of them, they got the PowerPoint software in front of them, they'll go, okay, I got a topic. I'm going to be speaking for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. All right, what do I know about this topic, right? And as a result, what we'll do is we'll just start typing. Type. And when we're finished, we'll have 142 bullet points there's no way possible we can cover that much content in such a short period of time. So then we start chopping bullet points out to make it fit the time frame, and then we end up with this weird Swiss cheese kind of presentation, right? So better way to do it is to think about the concepts that you want to cover, basically the topic that you want to cover, and just focus on the 3, 4, 5 most important things that the audience needs to know right now about that topic. And if you do, it'll help you get much more focused. Give me an example of this. I mentioned on one of the earlier videos that I had one of my first kind of failures in front of a group was when I had to give a presentation after after my internship with a big oil company. Well, in that meeting, one of the big challenges, one of the things that I really screwed up on is that I tried to take the entire 3 months that I was working for the company and put it into one presentation. Basically, I had to take, I was taking 12, 13 weeks of experience and trying to put it into a 15-minute speech. And so, and basically what I did is I sat down at my desk, I had my legal pad, and I wrote down the 15, 20 different things that I did for the entire summer and kind of summarized it in one little presentation. Well, the problem was that as I started to kind of repeat it back over and over again, to try to kind of memorize it, to get it to where I had it down, really pat, I would always forget something. There were so many things that I was trying to cover that I would forget something. And when I would forget something, it would cause me to panic more and make it much more challenging. Well, what's interesting though is that one of the ladies that worked with me at the time, she was also an intern, a couple years older than me. She was actually in law school, was just graduating from law school. And instead of covering the entire 3 months, basically she focused on one specific project that she and I both worked on, right? And she basically did her entire presentation on how she wrote all the contracts up for this big sale that we kind of completed together. And when I got up to give my presentation, I was zooming. I was trying to get all my content in. I was going through it really, really fast. I was forgetting stuff. I don't even know if I covered everything, right? When she got up, she was really calm. She was really cool as she presented because she was talking about that one thing. And she basically just told a story about that one project from the time we started it to all the different things that we did, and then how we finished by getting a big sale for the company. And so as a result, her presentation went a whole lot better. So you want to take her, basically take what she did and do it in your own presentations as well. Instead of trying to cover, 15, 20, 30, 100 different bullet points in your presentation, focus on the 3, 4, 5 most important things. And if you can, if it's a short presentation, you might just focus on one thing. If you do that, you're going to be much more concise and your audience is going to be more into your presentation. Second thing you want to do is you want to prove that your bullet points are true. So if you come up with your 3 most important bullet points, you want to go back to each one and kind of prove that each one is true. The analogy I like to use here is you're kind of like an attorney and you're presenting your case to the jury, right? So you're trying to prove to them that the suspect had motive. You want to prove that the suspect had opportunity. You want to prove that the suspect had the means, that kind of thing, right? So by making each one of those bullet points, you have to be able to prove it with evidence. One of the best pieces of evidence that you can use is examples or stories. The stories that you put into your presentation are very, very effective because you can put a lot of the content that you would normally put into a bullet point into a story format, and it makes it to where people actually remember it a whole lot more. Give an example of this. Let's say, for instance, that you're given a financial presentation, and the financials for the last quarter were that revenue was up by 10%, but we spent an extra $50,000 in fixed costs, so as a result, profit was only up 2%, right? So what most people would do is they would just put 3 different bullet points with the numbers on them, right? Pretty boring. Not very interesting. Plus, a lot of times when we just give them the statistics and the numbers and the figures, people are going to forget it anyway. But if you tell it to them in a story format, folks will actually remember the details that you want to get across to them. In addition to that, it makes it much easier for you to deliver the presentation as well. So for instance, instead of just giving them all the facts and figures, tell them the story behind the facts and figures. You can say, well, basically 3 months ago, when we were putting together our marketing plan for the past quarter, what we decided to do was spend a whole lot more money in advertising, and we put out some full-page ads in a few magazines, which actually increased our fixed cost on the advertising by about $50,000. So it was about $15,000 per page per month that we did this. We were expecting that we were going to get a whole lot more sales as a result, but in reality, the sales didn't come through nearly as much as what we would. So because we made that error in marketing, it basically caused us to increase our revenue a little bit, but actually reduce our profit by about 3%. So basically, you can give them the facts and figures with the story behind it, and it makes it a whole lot more interesting, right? The last thing you want to do is you want to summarize your presentation at the end, because when you summarize your presentation, it calls attention to those things that were most important that you were covering throughout your presentation, but it also makes it to where the audience will retain the information for a longer period of time. So right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I'm from, was a famous motivational speaker was here for years and years and years, Zig Ziglar. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago. But one of the things that he used to say that was really cool was he would say, if you're going to give a good presentation, you got to tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them, basically. So he's basically telling them, give a good introduction. Don't try to make it a mystery about what you're going to cover. Give them a good introduction by telling them your topic and your 3 key bullet points. Then, once you go back to each bullet point, give them some evidence. Prove each one of those bullet points. Every time you give a new story or example, you're proving that bullet point over and over again. And then finally, at the end, go back and repeat it one more time in a summary. So, in summary, you want to give a good design a presentation very, very quickly. Basically, you want to narrow down your key bullet points to about 3, 4, 5. Give some compelling evidence for each one of those bullet points, and then summarize that at the end. If you do that, you'll design your presentations very, very quickly. That makes sense? So basically, that's kind of the structure, and it's a good way to kind of create a backbone for a presentation. So the next time you have a presentation that you're trying to design with your bullet points for and that kind of thing, come up with a really good topic, a really good title that is kind of audience focused. So basically what you want to do is when you're thinking about that first step in creating that title, you want to kind of ask yourself, okay, if I were sitting in this audience, what would I want to know about this content that the person who's speaking is presenting, right? So like for instance, let's say I'm giving that financial presentation I was talking about before. Well, if we just put the title up as, fourth quarter financials, pretty boring, right? But if you make the topic a little bit more compelling to the audience, it's going to be much more interesting for them. So you got to ask yourself, why does the audience need to know about this quarter of our financials, right? So basically, when the audience changes, it's going to change your title. So if I'm giving that presentation to the C-level executives, that presentation is probably going to have something to do with profit, because that's the part of the financials that the C-level folks, the CEO, COO, CFO, all those folks, right? All the folks with the C's in front of their names, they're mostly concerned about the profit, right? So I'm going to talk about the profit that we created in the last quarter, right? If I'm on the sales team, let's say I'm the sales manager or the sales people, they're mostly concerned about revenue and bonuses and commissions and things like that. So if I'm going to design that presentation for them, I'm going to design it with that in mind. So commissions were up 3.2% this quarter, right? So basically, you're going to design the presentation title for the specific audience that we're delivering the presentation to. That makes it a whole lot easier now to narrow down your key points to just a few things. Because if you're covering, last quarter financials, there's a bunch of stuff that happened last quarter. But if we're talking about the 3 most important things that happened to us that caused us to get the profit that we created last quarter, that's a little easier. If we're talking about if we're delivering it to the salespeople, and we're talking about the 3 areas that created the most commissions for us or created the most revenue for us, all of a sudden, because the focus of the presentation has changed now, our key points have changed as well. So basically, you go back to those bullet points that you just created, and you want to put in some examples for each one of them, a story for each one of them. You can put in other things as well. You can put in your statistics and your visual aids and all that kind of stuff. But really, what you want to do is you want to put an example or a story in there that really takes the visual aid and brings it to real life, right? So give them an example along the way. And then finally, at the end, you just summarize your presentation by just repeating your topic and your 3 key points. All right, so let me show you what happens when you put all this stuff together. Give you an example of what one of these 3-point talk format presentations kind of sound like. My topic is how public speaking can really help you increase your income, or being a very good public speaker anyway can help you improve your income. Basically, there's 3 things I want to cover. First thing you want to keep in mind about public speaking is that people determine your competence based on the confidence that you present when you stand up to speak. Second thing you want to keep in mind is that when people speak about a topic in their industry, they're always seen as the expert in the industry, right? And then finally is when speaking can really open up a lot of additional revenue streams that you may not even thought of. So let's go back to the first. The very first thing that you want to keep in mind is that people will determine your competence based on the confidence that you present, or that you show when you present anyway. So, like for instance, let's say that you have to have surgery. Something you're ill and you have to have surgery, and the surgeon walks in. The surgeon kind of stumbles around. You can see his hands kind of shaking, his lips kind of quivering. When he walks in, he's got a bead of sweat on his upper lip, and he comes in and he's going to tell you about the surgery. He says, we're gonna take out your appendix, if that's okay, right? That kind of thing, right? Well, the moment you see that, all of a sudden you're going to be thinking about, maybe I should get a second or a third or even a fourth opinion, right? The reason why is because that person, if he comes into the room like that, he's not really showing you that he's competent, right? A good example from my own life. I actually did have my appendix taken out. I was about 12 years old, and I remember the surgeon coming after the surgery was over. And the surgeon will come in, and a lot of times they'll bring students with them. Well, the surgeon came in. He had about 5 or 6 different students that were kind of watching him, and he was doing the post-surgery checkup, right? And he was taking his hands and he was kind of pushing it on the wound, right? Well, out of sheer reaction, because it was so painful when he touched it, I grabbed his wrist. It was painful. I was trying to get it to stop, and all of a sudden, without even looking at me, just in a very calm, cool voice, he kind of said, "Doug, don't grab my hands." And just as quickly as I reached up to grab him, I pulled him back too, because I knew this guy's in charge. He is not, he's basically in control, right? You know what? Every one of those other guys that were there, every one of those other doctors that had all been through medical school, just like he had, they'd been practicing for a little while, but they saw him as the expert because of the way that he carried himself. And when you stand up to speak, when you stand up and speak and you're confident in your delivery, you're being seen as being competent in what you do on a day-to-day basis. The second thing that you want to keep in mind is that when people speak on topics that are in their industry, they're almost automatically seen as being the expert in that industry. I'll give you a good example of this. There's a friend of mine down in San Antonio who he was actually at a convention. It was an industry convention. He was in the credit industry, and one of his buddies was actually one of the guest speakers. He was up on stage. My friend was sitting in the front row, and one of the people in the audience asked a question of the person who was up on stage and about a specific software package that had just been released, and he was asking about the different aspects of this software package. Well, the guy who was on stage actually wasn't as familiar with that software, so he asked his buddy who was sitting in the front row. He said, "Now I know my buddy down here actually has that software, so he's kind of an expert on it, at least as much as in the room anyway." So he had his buddy come up on stage, and stood up and he spoke for a little while, and he kind of got the bug, because basically what happened to him is from the time that in that 5 or 10 minutes that he just got up and answered questions, for the rest of that convention, folks were coming up to him and asking him questions about all kinds of things unrelated to the software package. And he started noticing that because he got up and spoke one time, he was automatically seen as being the expert. And now he travels around the country doing all kinds of stuff, not only in the credit industry, but also teaching leadership training and that kind of thing. But he got his start by basically being pulled out of the crowd and getting a chance to speak. So people will always assume that the person who's on stage or the person who's up in front of the group or the person controlling the slide deck is going to be the expert. So if you want to be seen as the expert in your industry, you need to be the person who's delivering those presentations. And finally, the third thing you want to keep in mind is that speaking will actually open up additional revenue streams. Well, the first thing you want to know about public speaking is that it is one of the most lucrative industries in the world. Because when you stand up and speak, you're doing what 99% of the people in the audience wish they could do. So when you stand up and you do it well, you're all, like I said, you're being seen as the expert, and it does create a lot of revenue streams. Now, there are places where you can actually go and get paid just to speak, right? Which happens. It's a very difficult kind of industry to kind of break into, but that is there. However, speaking is a fantastic marketing tool. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to get more customers, basically, if you go out and speak about your expertise, people will automatically see, go back to point number 2, they'll see you as being the expert. If you're the expert, you're the person who they want to spend money with, right? If you're in sales, if you're really good at giving presentations, you're much more likely to get more of those big contracts because they want to see people who are confident, see people who are in control before they sign over the big contracts to you, that kind of thing. So basically, it opens up a lot of different revenue streams. So basically, if you invest in yourself and become really good at speaking, there are basically 3 benefits that you're going to get. The first thing is that people are going to see you as being competent because of the confidence that you present. Second thing is that when you speak on topics that about your industry, you're going to be seen as the expert in that industry, and you're going to create brand new revenue streams that you haven't even thought of. Kind of makes sense? So basically, let me kind of go back and show you what I did in that little presentation. I gave you the introduction, and all I did was just give you my title and my 3 key bullet points, right? And then for each one of the bullet points, I just gave you a simple example from my own experience, a story, that kind of thing. And then at the end, just summarized it at the end. Now that's a very good backbone of a presentation that you can use. And if you use this as your backbone, when you start adding in additional stuff, it's going to create a very easy way to create some very compelling presentations. Anyway, great tip from fearlesspresentations.com. Use this very, very often, because if you do, it's going to make giving presentations and designing presentations especially much, much, much easier for you.